Welcome to another episode of the Spoon Mob Podcast. This week I'm joined by Chef Bryce Gilmore. He's the chef owner of Barley, Swine, Odd Duck, and Sour Duck, which are all located in Austin, Texas. I actually had the pleasure of going to Barley, Swine firsthand a little over a year ago. It was March 2022 when we were making our way through Texas. We went to I think 5 different cities, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and Corpus Christi. And Barley Swine was like the first restaurant that we visited on our trip, and it was one of our favorites. Didn't really have any expectations kind of going through the Austin food scene and where we wanted to eat. And we had to kind of rule out any sushi restaurants just because my wife was pregnant at the time. And it was between Barley Swine and Odd Duck, kind of going back and forth, and just chose Barley Swine, just basing it off like Instagram photos. Didn't really know too much about it and had a fantastic time. You know, it's a tasty menu. We sat at the counter, got to watch the kitchen work, which is always fun. Really enjoy counter restaurants. I know some chefs we've had on the podcast are kind of like, I don't really enjoy being on the other side of the counter, but some do. And, you know, we love it just because you kind of get something else to focus on if you ironically don't want to have a conversation with somebody that you're with, or, you know, just want to be able to fill the gaps in the conversation or whatever. But the cool thing that I really like about the counter restaurants, and I kind of talked about this with Mark Zimmerman too, is you get to see everything and you get to watch all the communication between everybody that's working in the kitchen. So in Mark Zimmerman's case, there was a lot of nonverbal communication that I picked up on. With Bryce here, and I tell him kind of to start the interview too, you know, the one thing that I noticed, you know, once we kind of figured out who he was and everything in the kitchen, was how he moved around the kitchen. There was no wasted movement, no wasted energy. Everything was methodical. You know, I compared it to essentially, you know, a shark, how they never stop swimming, but everything is kind of purposeful. There's no flailing about. There's no running over here, running over there. And that was the cool thing to watch, and just to be able to watch him through over the course of our dinner, you know, shift to this station, go back to the dessert station, come up front and help, you know, on the cold app station, you know, when they're falling behind, they're getting slammed with like 12 different apps that the chef there had to make, you know, and she's the only one on that station, and that kind of progresses through the tasting menu. So that's always the cool thing for us to watch. Probably makes no sense to a lot of people. Some people who listen to this, probably it does, but it'd be similar, you know, to compare it to watching a professional basketball player, like watching LeBron James, right? But instead of the camera following the ball, the camera only follows LeBron through the whole game. So you watch him move without the ball, kind of where his eyes go. Like that whole thing. It's kind of this next level, like nerd thing. So that's the cool part that, you know, we love about counter restaurants and everything. And we had a fantastic time. The food was awesome, super unique. They get all their stuff from, you know, local farms. You know, we kind of get into all that in the interview and what he's working on next, which is opening his own farm too as well, which is a cool concept that he's kind of working the first time, going to be doing the first plantings and everything this year. It's called Riverfield Farm. And you can follow it on Instagram at Riverfield Farm. It's river.field.farm. You can also follow him and the restaurants on Instagram at Bryce_Gilmore, at Odd Duck Austin is for the Odd Duck restaurant, and then at Barley Swine and at Sour Duck Market, all one word there. That's all the accounts that they have on social media for all the businesses and restaurants and everything. You can follow us on Instagram too, at Spoon Mob. We're on all the other social medias, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. It's either Spoon Mob or Spoon Mob 1. You can follow us there, but primarily we use the Instagram to do most of our stuff, posting new photos, links to the podcast, updates on, you know, podcast episodes, all that stuff. Check out our website, spoonmob.com. We got chef profiles up there. We keep it up to date with any new information that comes out since they've been on the podcast. We have food photos from all of our stops at all the different restaurants and stuff that we've featured on the podcast too as well. Even the wine bars and stuff like that, we post photos too. We have links to all the episodes up there. There's a master page for the podcast. There's also, you can go into the individual chef, sommelier, insider profiles, and we have links to all their episodes too as well. So if you're looking for a specific one, feel free to write in questions, comments, feedback through either the contact portal on the website or directly to us, spoonmob@yahoo.com. Thank you for people that have been writing in. We try and integrate those questions into the best episode that we kind of feel it fits with after we do the initial research. That way it kind of comes in at the end of the podcast. So it's a cool little thing that we do, and we kind of link it all together and everything, you know, even with the chefs leaving behind questions and whatnot too. Make sure to follow, subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. We're on all the platforms. You can find us, just search Spoon Mob or use our Instagram bio link. That'll take you through a link tree. It'll get you to all the platforms. We also post links whenever there's a new episode out too as well. So You can follow that and find the best app or your preferred app. We're on everything, and then everything hits YouTube a week later after it releases on the podcast apps too. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel if that's your preferred method to use and listen to podcasts or watch podcasts or whatever. But without any further delay, here's my conversation with Chef Bryce Gilmore, the executive chef owner of Barley, Swine, Odd Duck, and Sour Duck Market in. Thanks again for coming on the podcast. I know you're a busy guy. You got 3 different restaurants there in Austin. We've had the pleasure, I think it's just under a year ago, we went to Barley Swine when we were doing a little trip through Texas there. We got the pleasure to eat there firsthand. Fantastic experience, awesome kind of vibe. Like you got all the jars with everything kind of fermented and everything on the counter, and you can see right into the kitchen and everything. You were there too as well, just in the kitchen. And the cool thing that I remember too was watching everybody just, do their stations and everything. And you're kind of just in the middle. You're just off to the side of the pass, essentially, the expo. And pretty much like expressionless, like in a good way though. But like you just kind of were watching everything. And if this person needed help on their station, you just kind of went over and helped them. And then you went back to, where you're standing. And then somebody else would do something and you walk over, or then the CDC there, Kevin, if he went somewhere else, you kind of just, covered what was going on and then moved back. Like you were just kind of like a shark. Like everything that you did had purpose, like every movement that there was no like wasted movements, if that makes sense. And it was just, nobody else probably picked up on it. It's probably just a nerd thing on my end, but I just thought it was really cool just to watch you just kind of watch the whole thing in service, just kind of go and just made all these little subtle moves, had to be wherever you needed support and stuff like that. So, but I want to get to, Barley Swine and Odd Duck and Sour Duck and everything, and the ethos of all that stuff. But I always like to start at the beginning with everybody. How did you kind of first get involved with cooking and everything? Because you're from Austin originally, right? And your dad had restaurants?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I don't do too many podcasts, so I appreciate talking to you. And I never thought of someone observing me talking about it in so much detail. It's funny because I've normally I would be the one expediting when I was there, but I'm trying to retire from that. Just kind of wander around the kitchen. I grew up in kitchens. My father's a chef. He's been doing it since he was 15. And I started working in restaurants when I was 14, and kind of all I've ever known and done. And starting at a young age certainly was beneficial for my kind of beginning of my career. It's been a fun ride so far.
So you first got started bussing tables, right, at your dad's restaurant. At the time, I think it was called Tejas.
Yeah, Tejas. They had a couple of restaurants in Austin. We're expanding kind of around the country at the time, which is kind of neat because I spent the year after high school traveling with him to open other restaurants. So I got that experience. And this was before I went to culinary school. But yeah, I started out bussing tables. I did that for a couple of years and started running food and expediting and kind of worked my way into the kitchen. And as soon as that happened, I was pretty set on this business. And when I was just bussing tables, I was kind of like, I don't like restaurants. I don't want to do this. But I was 14, so who knows?
Did you always want to be in kind of the back of the house in the kitchen? The one eye was always wandering over there kind of thing?
As soon as I started working in the kitchen, I was pretty hooked on it. I like the energy. I like the camaraderie. I like the teamwork. Idea of creating something with your hands, and it's kind of instant gratification where you make it, somebody eats it, kind of tell if they're going to like it or not. Which that's kind of partly why I like the open kitchen concepts. You can kind of watch the guests as they're dining, and when you know your guests are having a good time, it really makes it all worth it. I've always loved the kitchen atmosphere since I first started doing it.
So after high school, you wind up going out to California and you go to the California Culinary Academy. So what led to you going out there instead of going to the CIA in New York? Why'd you go to California? Why'd you go west?
CIA was on my list. I think at the time there were really only a handful of really good culinary schools. It was CIA, the California Culinary Academy, and then I think the New England Culinary Institute were the top 3 that I was aware of, that I was looking at. I was born and raised in Austin. So I've only lived here or other towns around Austin. When we went and visited San Francisco, went to the campus, which is downtown. It was downtown, right in the heart of the Tenderloin. Walking around, I was like, this is really different and new and interesting. And there were really good restaurants in the city that I knew that I would be able to work in while going to school. that was kind of part of it. I wanted to be able to have a job while going to school. And I know that like the other culinary schools, New England and CIA, CIA is not in New York City. Had it been, it would have been a different story. And I wanted to be able to go to school, walk to school from my apartment, go to work, walk to work from my apartment. And there's great restaurants there. I just love San Francisco, honestly, after visiting it. That really pretty easy decision. And it was very eye opening.
Where'd you work when you were in school?
There's this place called Enrico's. I walked into a couple kitchens kind of way out of my league. They were the only place that like allowed me in and let me stage and hang out and hired me. I didn't know any better. I didn't know, I don't think Michelin was around back then in America, but these were like Michelin star restaurants that I was walking into while going to culinary school, and they wouldn't even give me the time of day. So, but this place did like kind of Mediterranean, Italian, Spanish cuisine. They had a little wood fire pizza oven, wood fire grill. So that was my first experience with those things. And it was a decent restaurant. I would say like for San Francisco at the time, it was average, but like compared to like restaurants we have here in Austin in 2003, it was pretty good. So like we were, foie gras and stuff like that too, which is neat stuff. But so I worked there during school. Spent like a year and a half or so there in San Francisco, and ended up coming back to Austin for a little bit. Well, I also worked at this place called Cortez, which is also another kind of Spanish Mediterranean restaurant, which I learned a lot. I learned a lot there. I think those flavors, those techniques, and those Italian, Spanish, French cuisines are very influential for me in the stuff that I like to come up with. So I combine that with like Tex-Mex Southwestern food that I grew up with.
Was that like your first exposure to some of those like cuisines? Austin, the food scene's way different now, obviously, in the last 5 years than what it was back in the early 2000s. But I can't imagine there was much more than maybe an Italian place or two around the city at that time.
Yeah, but but with my dad's restaurants and what I grew up with was even the enchiladas and fried steak. That was some barbecue, things like that. So yeah, to see like a real Spanish, Italian, French restaurant cook that food was very eye opening. I'm glad that I went out there because it exposed me to much more than if I were to stay in Austin, Texas. But after that, I came back home to Austin, worked at a couple places, spent some time at a place called Cafe 909, which was in Marble Falls, like an hour west of Austin when I was in my early 20s. And spent about 2 years there. It's a very small restaurant. But at the time, we were considered one of the top 5 restaurants in Austin, even though we were an hour away. This would have been like 2005, 6, something like that. Small restaurant. It was like three of us on the line. I ended up being the sous chef the last year I was there. The chef really taught me a lot there. Mark Schmidt, great knowledge to share. So I definitely took a lot away from that. While I was there, I was with my wife, and we weren't married at the time yet, but she got accepted to med school in Lubbock, Texas, at Texas Tech, which, if you don't know, is kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's not much good restaurants out there. She was going to do that. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go back to San Francisco. I'm gonna try to travel a little bit, keep working on my career while you're doing med school stuff. So I went back to San Francisco to work at Boulevard, which was great. And I think just being in California and having the experience that I had up to that point, again, I started to really pay more attention to the whole farm to table thing. There's a farmer's market in Embarcadero right next to Boulevard, so we can kind of stop by there on the way to work on the weekends. And everything we got at that restaurant was from some farm around there. And we would change our menu frequently there. That was a real awesome experience. And I really started to find that passion and love for the farm to table movement. And so I spent a year there. And after that, was trying to figure out what to do. So I ended up finding the chef in Aspen that, I'd always kind of had my eye on Aspen. So I knew there was like some good restaurants in the hotels there. The chef, Ryan Hardy, was a partner in a farm and was doing very authentic Italian cuisine, a lot of whole animal butchery, charcuterie, processing of the vegetables from the farm. Everything the farm produced, they'd bring, and the restaurants would have to figure out how to use them. So that was kind of like, those were things I wanted to learn. Just ended up moving to Aspen, spent a year there. So that was another good experience. I had never worked in a hotel before, so that was like the Little Nell Hotel. So you get a little bit of the hotel experience, which I'm glad I got, but I would never do that again. Little too much, too weird. Like doing room service, cooking, staff meal for the 200 something employees of the hotel while you're trying to prep for normal service. And it's like, this might be not be something I want to do for a long time, but I learned a lot there. And then, after that, I started to kind of just feel like kind of ready to do my own thing. And I knew that Austin was very kind of embracing the farmers markets more, I guess. I knew that every time I'd be in Austin, I'd go to the farmers markets and notice like more and more people going, and the food truck scene was huge, like really, really ramping up at the time. And I just started thinking, like, what if I did a food truck where I buy everything from local farms and just create like a small chalkboard daily menu. And I started talking about it with my buddies there, and I told the chef what I was thinking, and everyone thought I was crazy. Just you're gonna leave this good restaurant to go start a food truck? Are you nuts? Like, well, this is a stepping stone to a restaurant. I can't afford a restaurant. I was 26 and I didn't have any money, but I could get credit cards, and I maxed out my credit cards starting a food truck. But as soon as I had it in my head, and I thought it was a good idea, I moved back to Austin and staying with my parents at the time. They had some property, North Shore, Lake Travis. My dad had a big garage with tools, all the tools I needed. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a food truck. So found an old used catering trailer in Wisconsin on eBay, and for some reason thought like in my head I was like, that's it, that's the one I want. I thought since it had the infrastructure for catering that it would be an easy like thing to just upgrade to what I needed it to do. And I didn't want one of those boxy white truck trailers. I wanted something that had some character to it. There's a lot of Airstreams all over the place that people had done up. This was different. It had some cool character to it. Me and my brother ended up driving up to Wisconsin, and we get there, and I see this thing, and it's got painted on the side of it. It says Laura's Wiener Wagon, and it's basically painted to look like a hot dog. And I look inside of it, and I'm like, oh man, this is not what it looked like on eBay. Like, shit, well, I'm already here. I might as well buy it. We'll fix it up. We'll make it nice.
Did you get it for a little cheaper? Like, were you like, hey, this isn't what's posted on eBay? Like,
I can't remember. It was only $4,000 or $5,000. So, like, in my mind, it was a good deal. You see these people selling them for like $50,000 now. We drove it back. I spent the next 2-3 months basically like gutting it completely out. We like raised the ceiling because it was like right at our heads, so we like kind of raised the middle of it. And me and my brother did we did all the plumbing and electrical ourselves. Built a little area in the back where we had a kind of like a screened in porch so we could have a wood grill. And that was our only like cooking source for the trailer. I really wanted the concept to be like farm to table, but we're using a wood fire to cook everything. And so we got it all set up. I got it inspected. It was super easy. Time, like regulations were barely anything. And since I didn't have propane, I didn't have to have it fire inspected, even though I was building a fire inside of the trailer and it was made out of wood. Just crazy. It felt like the Wild West or, the time where we didn't have any regulations. So now it's much more strict, I think. That was nice to be able to like build my own restaurant with my own hands and have it actually be inspected by the city and be able to be used, and it was a valid business.
Were there a lot of other food trucks around at that time, or were you kind of on the front end of it?
I feel like I was kind of getting in when so like Franklin's basically had just been open. I think when I opened, they hadn't been around too long. I think Paulkey had opened an Eastside King trailer around the same time, a little sooner before us. So it was like these very serious chefs, entrepreneurs starting food trucks kind of around the same time, and taking the food kind of to the next level, not just tacos and hot dogs and things, So I would say we got in right at the right time, right when the boom was happening. And, it was a time in Austin where there were a lot of empty lots, a lot of parking lots, central areas that could be filled up with these trailer parks. Now all those empty lots and things are apartment buildings or high rises. So I think, we got in and out at the right time. Odd Duck in this apartment complex next to us is where the trailer was. This was all just a big empty lot. And now once they bought the property and started developing it, I just kept bothering the landlords to let me take the restaurant space since it was right there anyways. So yeah, I feel like we really, a lot of I would say a lot of my success would be attributed to timing of everything. Like we got in right at the right time with food trucks. Like everybody was loving it and going to them and taking them seriously. we could do whatever food we wanted to, and people would come check it out. So it was a fun time. It's a lot of work, but I love challenges, and that was a challenge, and I feel like we did pretty good with it.
What was the hardest part about running the food trailer?
Besides the long hours, really just figuring out the business, because I had never been in full control before, but I wanted it. That's why I did the truck. I wanted that control. I wanted to figure out how to make the business run and profitable and all that. And I had the basis down of how a restaurant works. Get all the percentages and the margins and stuff. Once you know that and you pay attention to how much money you're spending and what you're charging, all that stuff, it's not too complicated. And my brother, interesting enough, he had just graduated from Texas State when I was getting the trailer. So, and he got a finance degree. So this was 2009. There weren't a lot of people hiring for finance in 2009, so he didn't have much going on. Luckily, he stuck around and helped me out, and he's still one of my partners today in the restaurants. And he does all of our bookkeeping and payroll and everything, which is very, very nice. So just learning how to manage the business, hiring and firing people was definitely a lot to figure out. And paired with these 120-hour weeks that we were pulling, because it was just me and my brother for the most part at the beginning. Yeah, it was a lot of stress figuring it out, making sure we could pay her. I mean, I remember at the beginning calling my wife now, who was in med school, like, hey, can I borrow like $300 so I can make payroll? Because I had like one person I had to pay, and we weren't. It was like a slow week, and I think it was like in the winter, so it was just a cold week, and that's something. You also have to pay attention to the weather every day when you have a food truck. If it's raining or cold, you might not be as busy. So just making sure we could pay the employee, one or two employees we had as we started to grow. But yeah, we did a lot of the prep and storage at my father's restaurant, because he opened his own Jack Allen's Kitchen at the same month that we opened. So he let us kind of use a small little section of the walk-in they had, store our stuff, and I'd go in either go in early in the morning when there wasn't a lot of people there to do prep, or we would go in like after service at the trailer, go to the restaurant, and like basically try to do prep in the back while the restaurant was closing down. And then we go in the morning and do what we had to do, and then load all our coolers up with all the food we could fit in there, and everything we could prep in the time that we had, and we load it in the back of our trucks and drive to the trailer and start setting up. So we kind of like ran this restaurant out of our pickup trucks, igloo coolers. And a lot of times we sell out of food at like 7 o'clock at night just because we couldn't hold it anymore. We didn't, which is great. It's a good problem to have, I guess. But people would get mad, and it's like, I mean, look at what we're cooking out of here. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm literally storing everything in the back of my pickup truck. Like, of course, it was on ice and it was cold and it was all healthy and safe. There's only so much you can do out of a 7 by 20 box. So it was nice that we had the demand. We'd open, there'd be a line of people, and we'd just go until we ran out of food, basically. So the busier we were, the shorter service was.
You mentioned like you knew the concept for the food where you wanted, this open kind of wood fire kind of thing in the back of the trailer, and then you want it to be kind of farm to table. Were you going to the different farms and picking up the ingredients and the produce yourself, or were they still bringing it to you? Or how did you navigate that aspect of when you're running the food truck?
At the time, so this was 2009, there weren't a lot of restaurants really fully committed to buying everything from local farms. So there weren't a lot of farmers that were, I think, used to working with chefs. I would mostly get everything for the week on Saturdays from the farmers markets. So farmers were in town, so I would just go walk around, buy everything I could. I would get a half a pig every week from Richardson Farms, and basically use that half pig throughout the whole week, buy like extra cuts of whatever I needed. I think we were getting I'd get like ducks and rabbits and goats, and then started using like goat hearts and random cuts that I could get that were cheap. And I remember, and sometimes, depending on the season, there wasn't a whole lot to work with. There certainly just wasn't the networking, distributing thing we have going on now, and like the access to as many farms as there is now. I didn't know. I only knew who I could see at the farmers market, or like Boggy Creek, or the couple urban farms we had at the time. And then slowly, I think as some farmers that maybe didn't go to the farmers market started to figure out who I was, they'd talk to me and I could buy from them. But I remember one farm, they brought carrots to the farmer's market. And it was the first time I'd seen carrots. And I was so excited. It was like a new vegetable I could work with. It had just been like turnips and cabbage for a while. And I was super excited. And actually went and visited the farm. And I was like, hey, can I come here every Saturday and like stuff up from y'all? And they were working on like a wholesale program to start working with restaurants, but they weren't at the time. And they're like, well, no, like I'll pay regular retail prices. I just want to come and pick it up. No, we're not ready to do that yet. Okay, so I was like, I was trying to make it easy for them, and I wasn't about trying to get a deal or anything, and I just wanted to be able to go and like see it in the fields and maybe help harvest it and all that stuff. And it was like, nah, we don't want to deal with that. And then, 6 months later, they start doing wholesale and delivering to restaurants and stuff. So like, all right, whatever. It's mainly just going to the farmers markets. We have a distributor here called Farm to Table in Austin that does a great job of buying local product and selling directly to restaurants. And they were just getting started too at the time. They would drop off a couple things at the trailer throughout the week. But I would say it was mostly going to the farmers market every Saturday and just trying to buy like a week's worth of stuff.
Eventually, the food truck kind of blows up in the sense that I think Andrew Zimmerman's TV show Bizarre Foods and then Anthony Bourdain No Reservations both feature it at some point on their individual episodes. Did you have any idea that they were coming through or anything like that? Did they reach out, or was it just a surprise? Like, oh, they just showed up, and 5 minutes before they're like, hey, can we film? Like, are you okay with that?
All those shows, they gave us a heads up. It was super cool to be a part of that, especially No Reservations. Just to be able to experience being on that show. And the episode we did with the food truck, Anthony Bourdain wasn't actually there. He just did a voiceover for it. He did come back and went to Barley, Swine maybe a year or two after that for another episode where we did get to hang out a little bit. So that was pretty cool. And Andrew Zimmern was great. Really, really, really nice talking with him. And when I started the food truck and when I just starting off as a cook and a chef, I didn't really think about being on TV or doing podcasts or getting nominated for things. It was just like I just really enjoyed it, and I wanted to have a restaurant and I wanted to cook for people. So like it was kind of surreal when you start having these television shows that I would watch those shows. So to have them reach out and be like, no way, is this really happening? So yeah, they show up. You're like super nervous and like do your best, and then you get to see it on TV a couple months later, and it's like, wow, this is crazy. Again, I think just the timing of it worked out. Austin was like becoming really a cool destination for people to travel to. So a lot of these shows were coming here and featuring different restaurants and stuff. It was cool to be a part of that. Certainly helped us gain recognition and helped our reputation. And there's also Yelp was a big part of all that, which I absolutely hate. One of the things I learned real quick was to not read your Yelp reviews. But it got the word out. People look at that stuff, and we had good reviews enough to where people wanted to come. So, Yelp in a way helped us too, even though like it was very frustrating sometimes. I remember arguing with a lady online because she was complaining about the $6 I was charging for half of a quail. I don't know what you're comparing this to, but like you're eating half of an animal, a whole half of an animal for $6. Like, are you kidding me? Like, think about that. Sure, you might be able to go to this other place and get a whole quail for $10. I don't know, but it's like I just remember getting so mad and like people could complain about my menu prices, and I was running like a 50% food cost because the local food costs more. It was costing me more money, and I was able. I mean, the whole concept I knew from the beginning was like, hey, my overhead's a lot cheaper than running a restaurant, so I could run a higher food cost to balance the more expensive product that I'm bringing. So like all the meats that I brought in were more per pound than what a bigger restaurant would buy, and I was fine with that because I could run a higher food cost. So even at a 50% or 45% food cost, which now a lot of restaurants are in 25%, it was still too expensive. That's what I learned is like there's always going to be something people to complain about, and my menu prices were like $3 to $6. Yeah, there were small portions, but it's like you could get the whole menu for like 20 something bucks. It's like what I'm complaining about. It's crazy. So, those people are still out there think everything's too expensive, and it is what it is.
That still is all going on today. That has not changed since the food truck days by any means. you have the food truck. Did you always envision it being kind of a 2, 3, 4 year process where eventually you would have a brick and mortar for that? Like that was kind of the end goal. It worked out, but it took a little bit longer with them selling off the land, that you were kind of using. They developed it and you wound up getting back in there and actually opening a physical space. But
Yeah, when I started the food truck, the goal was to have a restaurant. I didn't really set a timeline for myself. I just kind of wanted to make that work, make money doing that, make it a profitable business. And I knew that if I could do that, that if I could build my reputation up, like getting to a restaurant space would be a possible. I didn't have money to start a restaurant. I didn't know any people that could just give me a bunch of money. Like my parents gave me a small loan to help with the food truck. So I was just like focused on trying to pay that back. Yeah, I think it was like 8 months into running the trailer, I came across a small, like 1,000 square foot space down the street on Lamar. And I ended up looking at that and I saw a lot of potential in it. And so just figured out a lease with the landlord. And I did not bother hiring a lawyer for all that stuff. I just did it, and which I regret. Starting the restaurant, I learned a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, so it was like 8 months. I think we signed the lease for Barley Swine. It was 1,000 square foot space, so it was small. And the way I envisioned it was kind of, I wanted to do this kind of gastropub concept because that was kind of a thing back then that I was seeing in like some bigger cities. So I think I raised like 200 grand between some family members, some friends and stuff. And then the architect that did my father's restaurant, he designed the restaurant, I think, like basically for equity in the business. So I tried to keep my opening expenses down as much as possible. And yeah, it was unfathomable to try to open a restaurant for less than $250,000 nowadays, but we did it back then. And that just brought on a whole other next level learning experience for me because now I was a real restaurant. We had a beer and wine license and just a whole other bunch of things to learn and be responsible for. And then so at that point, once we got the restaurant going, what did we do? We signed it in August and then we were open in December, which now that I think about that, to be able to do the construction we did and turn it around in 3 to 4 months is pretty crazy. It takes longer than that just to get a permit nowadays, let alone get the permit and do the actual build out and finish out and everything. Yeah, so then me and my brother, we had a decision to make of whether to keep the trailer going or not while we were starting the restaurant. At the time, we had a good amount of people working for us now at the trailer. So basically, most of them stayed at the trailer, and my brother took that whole thing on and he ran the trailer for the following year while I focused on the restaurant, hired the people I needed to hire for that. I was pretty hands off at that point for the trailer and just focused on the restaurant. And I think Dylan did a really good job of taking what we had been doing over the last year and just kind of building off of that. And then 2 years after the trailer opened, that lot got sold. So we had basically the option of closing down completely or we would have to move it somewhere else. We just decided to close it and just focused on the restaurant and then eventually more restaurants. It was sad to say goodbye to that, but our time was better spent focusing on the restaurants and building those up.
when you started Barley Swine in its original location, did you view it as a completely different concept? Like, I mean, I know you mentioned gastropub was kind of the original idea you had, but did you view it as an extension of Odd Duck, like almost bringing Odd Duck indoors, or was it just a completely different thing that you didn't really see associating the two together?
I wanted to keep the farm to table seasonality part of the menu there. I wanted to do whole animal usage there, but being able to, so we bought another wood grill, same brand and everything, but a different one for the restaurant. So we wanted to utilize wood fire in there as well. But having ovens and a stove and a fryer really opened up what we could do creatively with the menu, But I really enjoy trying to make the plates look nice, with the food truck, it was like everything's in a paper boat. So it's less about the aesthetics of the food and more just about the proper cooking and flavor of it. So I don't know. I just, we kind of came up with an opening menu with the guys that were a part of it, trying to have a good mix of fun things going on and stick with the winter season at the time. It just all evolved from there. We ran that concept. I wanted to do small plates. I think that was kind of the biggest thing of it. Just did small plates at the trailer to try to encourage people to get multiple things. I wanted to do small plates at the restaurant to encourage people to get multiple things. I didn't want to stick to the appetizer entree kind of format everyone else was doing. People would try to compare us to like a tapas restaurant. We served small plates, but obviously we weren't the tapas restaurant. We weren't doing Spanish food. We weren't doing that style of small plates. It was just kind of like normal plates, whether it was an app or an entree, just done in a smaller portion. Our cut of steak was 3 ounces rather than 16. I did 2 scallops instead of 4 or whatever. It was just like everything was just smaller, to try to encourage people to share. And all of our seating was communal at the time. So it was a small space. It was the way to fit more people in. So you could be sitting at a table right next to people you didn't know, which I thought was fun. It really added to the energy of the space. Felt like you were kind of sitting in a pub in Europe somewhere, but enjoying, a nicely plated plate of food that, we try to encourage people to have like 3 plates a person. So you can come in and have a wide variety of things. And it's like, chances are you're going to like most of it. If you hate one of them, you're still doing okay. If you go to a restaurant and you just have one entree and you hate it, it's kind of a bummer, right? So kind of adds to your percentage of success there. Because you're not going to please everybody with everything, but it was kind of neat. People could come in a group and get the whole menu. That was kind of the thing. You come with a couple people, you order the whole menu, try everything we're doing that day. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But that's what we did at first, and we ran that way for a couple years. Found small plates, communal seating, beer and wine only. As this property was being developed that Odd Duck is sitting on now, I just kind of had it in my head that I wanted to eventually do a larger restaurant, maybe try to take Barley Swine in a little bit more higher end direction, the ingredients and stuff, because we were doing foie gras and nice fish and nice proteins, and then maybe do a more casual, lower end, larger restaurant. So kind of in the development of all that, we were able to secure this space that we're sitting in now, just right down the street from where Barley Swine started. And in the process of getting that going, I kind of thought, well, I might need to tweak what we're doing at Barley Swine because we're right down the road. The idea was kind of being thrown around of maybe going to a more of a set tasting menu format. For some reason, I just was like, yeah, let's do that. Let's try it. So yeah, it was about 3 years into Barley Swine being open. We were getting ready to open Odd Duck, and we ended up going to a tasting menu only at Barley Swine so that Odd Duck could be a small plate, a la carte restaurant right down the street. So we did that for a little bit, about a year. I was spending a lot of time at Odd Duck. Odd Duck got open. I was going through some legal issues with my landlord at Barley Swine, so I kind of came to the realization that my time at that location was not going to be for much longer. I was dealing with, I think my landlord sued me. He wasn't recognizing my lease renewal because it was like a 3-year lease with a 3-year option. And he was trying to say my 3-year option was not valid because I didn't do it properly. There's tons of evidence for it. So he's trying to kick me out after 3 years being there. It's just like, who opens a restaurant wanting to be at their location for 3 years only? And I was also kind of legal battle with the restaurant in Florida that had just opened called Barley and Swine, which I sent a cease and desist letter to before they even opened. I had heard about it, hired a lawyer to help fight that. So I had Barley Swine was trademarked and all that stuff. And everyone I'm talking to is like, yeah, you got to fight it because you don't fight it now, and then anyone can use Barley Swine later, I was like, all right, $50,000 later in legal fees, like that restaurant ended up closing anyways. So I spent tons of money fighting this trademark infringement case and then fighting my landlord trying to kick me out at the same time. And it's just like, man, I learned a lot about the legal system and how expensive it can be. Had I maybe had a better lease from the beginning, could have avoided some issues. But
was he looking to just try and get you out of there so he could like re-rent it to somebody at a higher rate?
We were already paying above market value, and he was trying to raise it by like 50% or something like that. It's crazy. Probably like he was trying to charge me back then, 10 years ago, what it should be charged now. And I was just like, no, like it was absurd. Tiny restaurant, like it's 1,000 square feet. And he was a bad landlord. Like we had a lot of like parking lot. We shared it with like a lot of other businesses. Like he owned the whole property. Just didn't take care of of his business. So, anyways, I realized like I need to get out of there. So we started looking and like, well, I'm gonna go bigger then, and I'm gonna separate it from Odd Duck, so I don't have to worry about competing with it. If you want to do a la carte small plates from local farmers, you know. So we ended up moving kind of more North Austin to a restaurant that's a little bit smaller than Odd Duck, and I'd really kind of enjoyed the tasting menu format that we had started. I'm gonna build this restaurant. I'm gonna build out this kitchen to accommodate the option for the guests to do a tasting menu or have an a la carte menu. And so we did that at the new Barley Swine. So that was a whole other learning curve situation, trying to figure out how to run a kitchen, essentially two different menus, two different styles, two different formats. So that was interesting. Thought we did a pretty good job of doing that, and we ran that with. So we opened in 2016, I think, beginning of 2016 up there. So we ran that way for about 4 years until the pandemic hit, and then everything changes after that.
With Barley Swine and you have Odd Duck kind of at the same time, are you using the same farms for ingredients for both those restaurants, or do you have that separated out? You're very big with locally sourced, local farms, like everything's made in-house from scratch or, sourced from a farm. Like that's kind of it. There's no bringing stuff in from California kind of deal. So with that, like, did you keep the farms kind of separate, or was there a lot of overlap and you just kind of use consistent people that, you had good relationships with?
We use same farms for the most part at all the restaurants. And have done so the whole time. There might be some farms that we use more often, more regularly than others at different restaurants, but I don't try to like keep them separate or anything like that. It's like I want to try to spread the love with the farmers as much as we can, and I'm not trying to okay, we're only going to use this farm for this at this restaurant, and this it just depends on what the menu is at the time at each restaurant and what everyone has. Like right now, Kevin, the CDC at Barley, is doing a good job of he'll go to Boggy Creek every week and buy a good amount of the produce we use at Barley Swine there. Whereas I'm not doing that for doing that at the other restaurants. So if anything, Boggy Creek at Barley Swine would be the only like kind of singular relationship there. But otherwise, it's kind of like we'll use the same farm at all three restaurants a lot of times.
When you guys are kind of tweaking your menus, because you guys get stuff all the time, so you kind of like even Barley Swine, before the pandemic, then the tasting menu, I think one of the things that was notable about it was it would change like every day. Something would change on there. So is that based off of just whatever the farms are dropping off that day? And you're kind of like, oh, well, we're out of this now, so we can't really substitute this ingredient, but if we tweak it this way, like, and then that's just kind of how it winds up on the menu?
It's never ideal to have to change a whole dish on the fly with no heads up, but it happens all the time where a farmer just all of a sudden doesn't have thought they might have anymore or what they've been having. So you have to either change the thing completely or sub it with a different vegetable or something else that might offer similar flavor profile or texture or something that you think about, okay, why is this vegetable here? We can't get it anymore. So do we need to change the dish completely, or can we sub in something else and it'll still be good? But we always try to like stay ahead. We have an idea of what's going to go away and what's coming. So we always try to like start thinking about the next season before it comes, be ready for it. But it happens all the time where we'll have something on the menu. We'll order it from one of the farms, and then they'll tell us they don't have it anymore. So we'll have to make an adjustment. So I think being flexible and learning how to adjust the menu regularly is very important for us. Keeps us on our toes, keeps us always thinking about new dishes and new flavor combinations or whatever. So it can be, stressful and frustrating sometimes, but it's also, I think it keeps us going, and it's just part of the deal, It'd be a whole lot easier if we just picked a menu to open the restaurant with and source everything from Cisco that buys it from Mexico or California or whatever, and you don't have to think about it anymore. But there's the fun in that.
So when you change over the menu, because I think Barley Swine, you guys change it at least 4 times a year, with the seasons. Maybe you guys change it more than that. When you're coming up with the new menu, where do you start? Do you start with a particular ingredient that you want to incorporate, or do you start with the format where you're looking at, well, we know we're going to have some sort of protein here. We want to start with some sort of oyster or whatever. And you kind of build it that way. Like, what's your methodology there?
We can't really think of it like we have four seasons here. We don't really change the menu four times a year. It's little things throughout the year that change. And to be honest, like down here, it's kind of like two major seasons is what we have, and then we have like little micro seasons throughout it. So you're looking at like kind of the spring, like kind of spring, summer time, like early summer, late spring, and then like fall, winter is another one, kind of like late summer, fall, and then you have like certain ingredients throughout those that come and go. Peak of the winter, the peak of the summer are always like kind of the worst, less available. Everything's just too hot and dry, or you get some kind of freeze or rainstorm or something in the middle of winter that makes everything hard. So we're constantly just paying attention to that. So we never want to change the whole menu at once. So it's generally like one or two dishes at a time that we will change. But we have to do that while being mindful of the whole menu. Because a lot of times you want to like do something, it's like, well, it doesn't make sense because this has to change later, and we might need to use that for this or whatever. So keeping the whole menu in mind is important while we're thinking of like one individual ingredient or one individual dish. At Odd Duck, we're all a carte. So, we have, I think, 12, 13 things on the menu for savory. So I want to make sure that there's enough light beginning of the meal dishes that we're offering and enough and heavier dishes. And it's not too much one way or the other. Making sure there's a good variety of textures and just spreading, like I said, spreading the love on the ingredients, like not having broccoli on three different things while we're not using carrots or something, It's like, okay, let's try to use a little bit of everything, spread it out. Try to feature things, like if I'm going to put broccoli on a dish, I want it to be there for a reason. So put it on all kinds of stuff. It's not like choose your meats and three sides that you want to go with it. This is, if we put carrots or beets or broccoli on a menu, it's there for a reason.
Over the course of this time period, too, you get nominated, I think 2011, James Beard Rising Star Chef of the Year Award, Food and Wine Best New Chef, GQ's Best New Restaurants list. I think also Bon Appetit, both your restaurants wind up being featured in their kind of list too as well. When you start getting all these kind of recognition, awards, accolades, like all the stuff kind of comes through, does that change anything for you guys aside from just more people probably coming in that maybe wouldn't have otherwise?
I don't know. I think, like I said before, I it's kind of surreal when you get these kind of nominations and awards and things. I never thought about it when I got started. I always wanted to be the best I can be, but I never thought like I would get nationally recognized for this. I remember when I got the call for Food and Wine Best New Chef, I was just like it was so nuts to me because I remember those magazines when I was younger, seeing those every year, being like, oh, cool. We kind of need to be on there, but it's never going to happen. It's 10 people a year. Like, why would they ever pick me? And I think it was like the first year of Barley Swine. So it was like, they basically judged it off with like a food truck. That was very crazy. And then the Beard Awards and all that stuff. I held it with such high esteem. And like as a young cook, I knew what it was. I paid attention to who was winning Beard Awards and stuff. And again, never thought that I would be considered for that. So, and then going to the awards, I think it was 7 times in a row and losing changes your perspective too on things. I don't know. I think, did it change anything for me? I mean, I think it's just like they were learning experiences for me that, everything that happened, usually it comes with like going to an event, being around other, well-known, respectable people in the industry. So being a part of that was, a good experience for me. But again, I don't, that's not why I do this, so I don't think it didn't put any extra pressure on me. Of course, I would like to win every award I get nominated for because who wouldn't, but it is very satisfying just to be recognized as a chef. If you don't get enough satisfaction from your day-to-day business, you're in it for the wrong reasons. Every time I go to the Beard Awards and sit there and hear someone else's name called, I'm like, all right, back to work. Maybe I'll win it next year. But at the end of the day, like what matters is hundreds of people that are coming to our restaurants every week to dine. I want to make sure that they're enjoying it. And I know they're enjoying it. I get to watch them. I get to see them. I get to hear them tell me directly that they like our food. And that's why we do what we do. So you get this high every time these things happen, and then you're quickly reminded of what really, really matters, So I don't think it changed a whole lot for me at the end of the day, other than just gaining those experiences.
From a business standpoint, we had Alex Seidel out of Denver on this podcast, and he's the only one that's ever made me think of this when he mentioned it, because he was nominated, like you, for years and years and years and years, and then eventually finally won it. He said from a business standpoint, it was more valuable to be on the list every year versus actually winning the award, because there would be people that every time that list came out, they would go and hit all those restaurants that were in their city, and maybe they were places that they never gone to before or whatever. Business would kind of jump up. And he was like, then once I won the award, like, then it's kind of like everybody forgot. Like you lose kind of this customer base that they almost kind of forget that you exist. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I'm curious to hear kind of your take, because he's the only person that's ever, mentioned that to me. And I thought, like, yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it.
100%. I remember someone actually saying that to me. It's like, it's good you didn't win, because that means you're still like, your name's still going to be out there every year. It's like the more you're nominated, the better, right? I'd heard that before too. Regardless, I mean, all these things, whether you get number one, whatever, in your hometown newspaper or Spirit Award or whatever, like, yeah, it's a bump of business, but it's short. It's not like necessarily a forever thing, unless like you were really dead and nobody knew who you were, and then this like opened you up to the whole world. Oh, this guy's here, okay. But like if you're already like established, these things are a nice little boost usually, not something that's gonna like, if you weren't already busy before this award, you're probably not going to be like a whole lot busier moving forward, to be honest. People will come in because they saw you doing that, but it's not going to like last forever. Anytime you can remind people that you're there is a good thing. So to be in a publication or whatever on a somewhat regular basis is always going to be a good thing. So he's absolutely right that, yeah, if once you win or once you're not on the list anymore, like it's just one less thing to remind people that you're there. Especially right now in certain cities, I don't know how other cities are compared to Austin, but like we go through these times where there's just a restaurant opening every week. So everyone wants to check out the new restaurant, right? So no matter how good you are, sometimes like you get lost in the whole selection of dining options out there.
What gave you the idea to open Sour Duck in 2018? Because it's a bakery, it's a beer garden, it's kind of this combo, interesting concept that nobody else has really ever merged those two things together. I think there's been, places that are a bakery in the morning and then some other businesses running at night as like a brew pub or something like that. But what kind of gave you that idea to start that concept?
So I opened Odd Duck with a couple partners, Jason in the front of the house and Mark in the kitchen with me, who I had met in Aspen, Colorado, working on the line with him. Odd Duck at the time, around the opening of the new Barley Swine. So those guys are not partners in Barley Swine, so that was kind of like my solo thing. So I had enough going on. I felt pretty full and satisfied with what was going on in my life. But I know that like we were developing a good team at Odd Duck, especially in the kitchen. We were doing a lot of our own baking out of the hearth here. Mark had been doing his thing here, and I think people were just getting antsy. Like there needed to be another project to work on, and we were kind of maxing out what we could do here as far as baking went. So we started talking, and this concept of a bakery started being thrown around. It was something Mark was really into. I didn't have a lot of baking experience as a chef. It wasn't something that I wanted to like pursue exclusively. It was just all my baking experience was just like little bits here and there while working in different restaurants. But I never worked in a bakery. I never worked a bakery shift. That was definitely Mark's thing that he was very passionate about and brought over to Odd Duck, and had developed a great team. So we were just like, let's start thinking about what we can do with that. So I reached out to our broker, and one of the first places she showed us was like an old diner catering space and a big backyard, a couple rundown houses on that property. And I was like, man, this could be like a bakery that does wholesale, and like we send like breads and stuff to Odd Duck, and we can do like quick food here and like have a cool kind of beer garden thing out here. Where this old house is, we could put a whole separate bar building and all this stuff. It's like we could all kind of envision it, right, as we were standing up there. And that was all it took. We were like, yeah, let's do it. I think we spent couple years. We opened in 2018 with that, so we had to kind of gut that whole thing out, remove the two old houses, and add a whole separate bar building and all that stuff, and figure out how to run a bakery, doing wholesale plus stuff out of the bake case, and then figure out what the food was going to be out of there. So luckily, we had a hell of a team here at Odd Duck that a good chunk of them moved over there to get it open. That's always very important in trying to open multiple restaurants, is developing the team. You have the team in place at maybe the original restaurant, and you have a whole team that goes to the new one. People that you can trust, that you can rely on to help you through that opening phase where you're trying to figure everything out. We knew we had that. It made that decision a lot easier to open another restaurant.
And you were able to use the Odd Duck trailer, right? You incorporated that into the property?
They had just been sitting out on my parents' property, rotting away out there. So it's like, well, that's this whole yard. Maybe we can like use it somewhere. So I had a guy like gut it out. Thought it'd be cool to have like a little stage area for stuff. We were able to kind of fix it up nice enough to be able to. It hadn't been moved in a while. It was never super sturdy to move around anyway. So we kind of made it a little more structurally sound and cut the side of it open and kind of cleaned it up so we could just display it and have. Mainly, it's like a place where the kids hang out, and then a stage for bands every now and then. So I'm glad we were able to use it. That trailer was a big part of who we are, and it's nice to be able to use it again.
With the beer option and stuff, is that all local breweries and stuff that you guys try and incorporate and feature? Do you guys do any brewing on site of your own?
No, we don't brew anything. We obviously there's tons of breweries here in Austin, so we feature a lot of them. We're not exclusively local, so we do buy beers from other places, but we also feature a lot that are here. Same with spirits and things. No, we just wanted to have a good selection of beer on tap, and all of our cocktails are on tap as well. Ease of functionality and consistency. So we knew we were going to do probably a high volume in this place, and wanted to make sure that everything was streamlined for that purpose.
And you guys host a farmers market there on Wednesdays, right? Or were before COVID probably wiped out that idea?
We did for a little bit before COVID, and then that is one thing we've yet to bring back. We've hosted a couple markets, like monthly markets there, not just for farmers, but other people selling things. That's been fun, but we'll see. We've talked about maybe bringing the farmers market back if really comes down to if any farmers want to drive in and sit there and sell their stuff during the week. So we'll see. But I was glad to be able to do that for the year or two that it was going. One of the casualties of COVID for us was the farmers market going away.
That same time when the pandemic happens, you started publishing the Odd Duck Almanac, which is this cookbook, community magazine, farmer's almanac, like all kind of rolled into this one publication. So what gave you the idea to do that instead of like a traditional cookbook? Was that born out of the pandemic and just kind of looking for something to do and create, or was that kind of already in the motion before the pandemic happened?
It was before the pandemic we started it. Yeah, they approached us, folks that did it, and they had the idea. I really liked their style. I thought it was a cool concept. Been approached about doing books before, but nothing ever really panned out. This seemed like one that we could really have our hand in managing, and it was just a smaller scale concept of a book kind of publication, and really unique to us. So for a lot of reasons, it kind of made sense, and timing was right. So we did one, and then just kind of like adjusted how we did it the next two. And I think like after three, it was like, okay, I was thinking it might be something we'd do like every year, but I think after three, it was like I feel like this is a good stopping point for now, at least. We'll see what happens later, but it was a cool experience to create those, and something that hopefully people will have for a long time. And just another, like I said, like this is a book that sits around their coffee table or library or whatever, and whenever they walk by it, they see it and think of us. That's kind of the point. I want people to enjoy it and think about us every time they look at it.
Do you think you'll ever do a more traditional cookbook, or does that format not make sense?
I've thought about it. I've wanted to. I think I would want to do it myself. I don't think I would want to go through one of the major publishers. It's really just going to come down to timing and stuff and what's going on. Like I'm always one that wants to have some other project going on. So I'm actually trying to start a farm right now. That's my project right now. So once that's kind of up and running. We'll see if the book is the next one or not.
Where are you at in that process with the farm?
Getting the land. So we bought some property a little over a year ago, my wife and I. And, I always had the idea of trying to have a farm for the restaurants that I could own, I guess. I'm not a farmer, so I wouldn't be doing all the work, but just to have a place that grew vegetables and fruit just for our restaurants. We bought this property. It's more of an investment thing and kind of like thinking that maybe someday we could do a farm on it. And sure enough, like last summer, I think I was just going through like a month or two of like having a really hard time, like getting enough product for the restaurants or getting what we wanted from some local farmers. And it's like, you know what? Maybe now's the time to do it. It's not getting easier to buy all your food local necessarily. There's farmers coming and going. Sometimes it feels like more going than coming. It's not an industry that a lot of young people want to get into. So, and then you're seeing some farmers are able to sell all their stuff at farmers markets. They don't even need to work with restaurants. I don't know what the future of local food's going to look like in this town or in the country, but I would like to help, and so I'm going to do what I can with this piece of property. I'm in the process of trying to get the land, the soil amended. Had to cut down some trees and clear an area, and I bought a tractor, learned how to ride that thing, putting compost down, trying to get the land and soil ready, and hoping to do our first round of planting in March and see what happens. So I've been working with some farmer friends that we've worked with for a long time, trying to get advice and kind of steering me in certain directions of what to do. And I need to hire a farm manager as soon as possible, but so we'll see how that goes. I didn't buy the property with the idea that I needed the farm on it. So this is kind of like a bonus if it works out. If it doesn't work out, then it is what it is. But feel like if anything, the world could certainly use more farms. So I'm going to give it a shot, see what I can do.
So if all kind of goes, according to plan, with everything that you farm on this property that you're creating, is it going to be mostly main ingredients that you need for the restaurants? Or are you going to do kind of specialty things that you can't really get from other farms, so that way you can push the creative boundaries at some of the restaurants?
I think it's going to be an evolution of, and we'll figure it out as we go, just like the restaurants have been over the last 10 years. It's hard to say. I'd like to say, yes, I'd love to do like specialty things that I can't get from other farmers, but it's also, there's a reason why we're not seeing some of the things down here is because they're not going to grow very well. So starting out, I'll probably do the things that are safer that I think I have a better chance of having success at. I think just kind of like you have your certain amount of experimental things that are new and different and see how they do. I think what I'm most excited about is being able to walk around the fields and seeing the vegetables in the ground, try to do some fig trees. So seeing the trees and the figs and everything. It's like there's other parts of the plants that we don't use because we don't see it, but we can use. And I think like this is going to spark even more creativity for us and maybe open up some new things when it comes to even the ingredients that we've been using. Maybe we'll use the greens or the flowers more, or the stalks more, or the leaves more than we've done before, just because we haven't thought about it. Or when you walk around the field and you're like tasting the flowers, you can use this part of this plant that normally you wouldn't see. So we'll see if that sparks anything for us. Or maybe we can be more picky. Like if I want okra at an exact size, I can control that a little more and go out there and I can tell people, hey, pick this okra at this size. Whereas most farmers aren't going to take the time to want to do that. They're just going to, they can what they want to pick and then we buy it, which is fine. It makes sense. So I don't know. There's just a little bit more control, I think. It's our place. And I think it'd be fun too for the line cooks to have a place that kind of the restaurant's farm and they can come help on their days off and be a part of the whole process. I know a lot of them like to volunteer at different farms whenever it makes sense and see where we get our things from. And I think just to have our own place is going to make it even more.
I think on the Barley Swine website, there's it's like 71 different partners, producers, farms that you guys use, or different places that you source ingredients from, all that stuff. It's all listed on the website, but there's like 71 different ones. So like you mentioned with farming, farmers are constantly coming and going. How does that kind of change? Like, how do you get to the point where it's not having to have 71 different places that you use? Not that that's a bad thing, because like you said, you get to kind of spread the love, but you look around, a lot of farms, even here in Ohio, they're being sold because, the person that was farming it, they either retire, their kids don't want it, their kids don't want anything to do with it. They wind up retiring, moving to Florida, Arizona, whatever. They sell the property gets sold to some company that develops it in the 4/1 apartment complex or, whatever. So how does that change? Like, how do you see farming becoming something that people are interested in again? Or is that even possible?
If you counted 71 producers on our website, I guarantee you a good chunk of those don't exist anymore. Farming needs to be a valid option for people to get into as a career field, and money plays a big role in that. And it starts with the consumer. The farmer is going to make more money. The consumer has to spend more money. Just like any business. I want to keep making more and more money at the restaurant, so I need more and more people to spend more and more money when they come here. So I think that it's going to be important for the general consumer to demand small farm local produce and be willing to pay for it. And then you can have more and more small farms producing for this demand, and they're able to make a living doing it. A lot of these small farms are basically like one or two people doing all the work. It's hard to hire for. I mean, we could argue about whether there's a labor shortage or not, but there is a labor shortage for certain industries. Well, no matter, it's can't pay $30 an hour for farm work. Even you could offer people $20 an hour for farm work, and you're still going to have a hard time finding people. That's what we're doing. So it's already an industry it's hard work. So you have to want to do it, but you have to be able to support your family doing it as well. The demand has to be there. The people have to be willing to pay enough so that the farmer can charge enough. And we'll kind of see where it all shakes out. But it's one of those industries where like people get into it because they're passionate about it, and they literally break their backs doing the work and trying to take care of their family. And the way we can help is like by going to the farmers markets, by seeking out these farms and buying their product, and not trying to get the best deal from them that you can. It's like pay what they're asking and be happy about it. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, I don't know what the future holds for farming, but we've seen a lot of farmers go and retire, sell their property over the years. A few new ones coming on. I feel like more are going than coming, but we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. There are still some young people getting into it. I just hope it's enough. We'll see.
You got the farm going, so that's kind of the next thing for you professionally, is getting that set up, I'm assuming.
Yeah, this all goes well, we'll start producing and then having some product in the summertime, which would be like peppers and things, and just kind of like go from there. I'm only starting on an acre, so it's not a lot, but it's a decent amount. And if this goes well and I can find enough people to help out, then we'll just keep expanding. And I think if I was going to do all the produce, and vegetables and fruit for the restaurants, I would need 5 to 7 acres and be very efficient to really produce enough for what the restaurants are going through. So this will just be a certain amount that will supply us.
So we got a handful more questions for you. So this next question comes from previous guest on the podcast, Chef Vinny Cimino of Cordelia up in Cleveland, Ohio. He left behind for you. What drives you, gives you the passion to do what you do? What's your driving factor to not just be a chef, but a restaurant owner, a restaurateur, and a farmer, essentially?
I've always gotten so much joy out of eating restaurants, and I'm very passionate about restaurants and food in general. To be able to provide people with good experiences that hopefully will be memorable, things that they'll think about later in life. It's a good moment. That's what drives me. I like to make people happy, and knowing that being proud of the effort and work that we put into it, creating something that's unique, just makes it that extra special. That's why I wake up and come to work every morning. It's just to know that we're able to provide those happy moments for people, and then at the same time, while taking care of our staff, and trying to help them realize that what they're doing is important and should be proud of it as well.
What's a question you want to leave behind for the next guest? Can be anything.
What's your biggest regret since becoming a chef?
This next question comes from one of our listeners. They wrote in, will the influx of people relocating to Austin change the food scene, and will that be for better or for worse?
I mean, it's already happening. I think it's for the better. I think that people coming from other cities, bigger cities that have different restaurants, they're coming here and demanding more variety, things that will help this city evolve, I think, for sure. And I've noticed that since big boom started in the early 2000s to 2010. That's already happening. So I think that's going to continue for sure.
So this last set of questions we ask to everybody who comes on the podcast. So a nice compare and contrast across the episodes. So kind of rapid fire style here, but who would you say is the biggest influence on your cooking career thus far when you look back on it?
Well, that would have to be my father. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for him. I learned a lot of my basic cooking knowledge from him. And I think the biggest thing I would take away from him is the value of respect and hard work, integrity. Watching him gain the respect from his team in the restaurants when I was a kid, just through his hard work and dedication, was huge for me.
What's one kitchen item that's not a knife that you can't live without?
Spoon.
Restaurant you'd recommend that isn't your own. So scenario I usually give, person gets stuck at the airport, flight gets canceled, they reach out to you, your restaurants are closed, but you kind of point them in this direction.
I can go the easy route and say my dad's restaurants. Probably something, from Kevin Fink. Like, he's got a good amount of restaurants down here that are a good variety of things going on. So, Emmer and Rye, Hestia. I think those are nice, like, parallels to Odd Duck and Barley Swine.
Bucket list travel destination, bucket list restaurant. So place you've never been to, you still want to visit, and then place you haven't eaten at, but you still want to dine at one day.
Places I want to visit. Well, in America, I haven't been to Portland yet, or Tennessee, like Nashville. I'd like to go to those places. As far as places in the world, I would say Thailand, and then just Northern Europe. Restaurants I would like to go to Blue Hill, Stone Barns. I've been to Blue Hill in the city, but love to see the farm and everything. Single Thread in California. Sean Brock's new places in Nashville.
Craziest thing you've seen happen in a restaurant while you're working?
I'm going to say something, and then I'm probably going to remember something way later, and it'll be way crazier. People doing cocaine off the bathroom floor in the men's room.
Food or drink guilty pleasures, or anything fast food, candy, whatever that is not the healthiest for you, but you just can't help yourself?
I love liquor. So whiskey, mezcal, gin. I have a full bar at my house. I make myself a couple cocktails every night when I get home. It's a great relaxer, stress reliever. I don't dabble too much in candy, but my wife brought home a couple Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies that I've been snacking on. It goes really well with whiskey, by the way.
What is one cookbook, whether it's a professional chef, home chef, that you think everybody should own?
The French Laundry cookbook. I remember buying that when I was in culinary school. I mean, especially if you're interested in like fine dining and French cuisine, that was a good one.
Favorite dish thing you ever cooked, created, kind of looking back on your career, you can point to this as almost like your aha moment. Like you knew you could open your own restaurant, run your own restaurant one day.
It would either be the pork belly sliders we did at the trailer. For some reason, people were crazy over, or the shiitake stuffed pasta we're doing at Barley Swine right now. It's real fun. Kind of a play on soup dumplings meets ravioli. I don't know, just kind of fun texture. I've done so many things. I would say those two are the ones that maybe have gotten the most appreciation.
I'm an Anthony Bourdain fan. Not everybody is or was. You obviously had the pleasure of meeting him. So outside of that, though, is there a moment, episode, scene about him that stands out to you still? Or was there any other culinary personalities that you kind of gravitated towards when you were coming up through your career?
I had the pleasure of sitting down and having a beer with him at it used to be this old dive bar next to Barley called Horseshoe Lounge. It's not there anymore. Just me and him. It was like before they got open. We were able to go in there, filming us, talking and stuff, and just being able to kind of one-on-one chat with him was a cool experience. I love his. He's just so articulate and provides a unique, like a perspective on life and eating out. I think is something you don't see from anybody else. But I remember reading Kitchen Confidential when I was a young cook, and I was like, yeah, this is the life that I'm getting into and I'm living right now, and it's like, this is cool. I'm down with it. He captured it. I don't know. I think I would agree with you. I'm a fan of his as well, and always enjoyed watching his shows and reading his books.
Where can people find you? Social media, website, reservations, plug everything.
I don't participate too much in social media, so it'd be a waste of time. But Barley Swine, Odd Duck, Sour Duck Market, easy to find on Instagram, and you can make reservations at Odd Duck and Barley Swine very easily on websites. And following us on Instagram would be the best way to get any new info on us.
Yeah, and you guys are open. I think it's Barley Swine. I think it's Wednesday through Sunday. think Odd Duck is it every day?
Every night at Odd Duck. Sour Duck is Wednesday through Sunday all day. Barley Swine is Thursday through Sunday, just for dinner.
But yeah, we had the pleasure of eating at Barley Swine. It was awesome, awesome experience, delicious food. So I haven't tried Odd Duck yet, but looking forward to, whenever we're back in Austin, trying Odd Duck. One of the people we've had on the podcast, she actually lives here, Carrie Young, actually worked at Odd Duck back in kind of the mid-teens when she was in Austin there. She's up here.
I remember Carrie. She worked the grill with a broken arm, a couple shifts, and everyone was like, "Damn, that's amazing."
Yeah, it took her forever to get hired in your restaurant there. She tried a couple times, and you guys had a waiting list apparently out the door. So
must have been back when hiring was a lot easier. She was great.
We had an awesome time. She's doing her thing up here, but yeah, looking forward to trying the Barley Swine. Obviously, new menu by now, but Odd Duck and everything too. Whenever we get back there, keep in touch. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. We always try and support everybody as much as we can. Always an open invitation to return on the podcast, talking about a new concept, new menu, whatever. 10, 15 minutes, whatever. That's always a standing thing for everybody. But cool concepts, delicious food, and look forward to seeing you soon and trying more delicious food from you guys down there.
Thanks for reaching out and having me on.
Big thanks again to Bryce for coming on the podcast, taking some time out of his day to jump on and chat about his career and what he's got going on with the farm coming up and the ethos of kind of Barley Swine and Odd Duck and how all those are integrated together but came about in their own individual way too as well. So kind of a pretty interesting story, I thought, and I'm glad we were finally able to get him on. He's somebody that I've been kind of chasing for a handful of months and was super excited when he agreed to come on. And then once it happened and everything too, it was still super exciting just because we had such a great time at Barley Swine. I mean, I couldn't recommend that restaurant enough if you're in Austin. I know Austin has a prevalent food scene. There's a lot of great restaurants in that city. I mean, we've, had a couple people on from Texas and everything. I know Austin gets kind of all the press and everything these days. There's a lot of great restaurants in Texas, but I mean, you're going to be hard pressed to find a better experience when, you land in Austin and you're like, where should I go? Like Barley Swine's got to be among your top choices. It's that good. And it's that cool of a restaurant. It's a little weird. It's one of those things where, and I've had this happen a couple times in Texas where you arrive at the restaurant and it's kind of in like this strip mall-y setting, which is a little confusing because that's not normally the case for like the East Coast or, even the Midwest, where usually if you find a restaurant in a strip mall, it's kind of like almost lesser than in your mentality, the way you approach it. But it's very common with how kind of Texas is laid out in the cities and stuff to find great restaurants in that kind of like strip mall-y setting. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not just like thrown together or anything. It's a very decadent, like purposely thought through restaurant, the way they have it set up and everything too in there. It's state of the art, but it's just something that throws you for a loop when you first arrive if you're not used to seeing, that. And I think LA is kind of the same way too as well. But yeah, I couldn't recommend it enough. So check them out. You can, again, follow them on Instagram at Bryce_Gilmore. You can also follow the restaurants at Odd Duck Austin, at Barley Swine, at Sour Duck Market, and you can follow the farm that he's starting at river.field.farm. Make sure to follow us as well at Spoon Mob. Check out our website, spoonmob.com, and also make sure to follow, subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform that you listen to the podcast on. And that is it for this week. More episodes coming, so appreciate everybody who's been listening. If you're new, welcome. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode and continue to check out previous episodes through the back catalog. And also, again, make sure to follow, subscribe so you get all the new episodes directly into your feed once you do. And if you've been here for a while, thank you for your continued support and continue to help, spread the word. If you wind up at one of these restaurants or businesses that we've featured, make sure to let them know that you heard about them on the Spoon Mob podcast and heard their interview. We always want to pass along that kind of good fortune and review and word of mouth to them too as well, so they know it was worth their time to come on the podcast, and that they have a support system with us here too as well. We try and support everybody as much as we can in a variety of different ways, whether it's resharing their Instagram stuff, new menus, new dishes, upcoming events, stuff like that. Having people return to the podcast when they have something new to chat about too as well, and update us on and update the listeners. Patroning their restaurants as much as we can, whenever we can too as well, just because they're great places to eat, great places to experience. And, if the word doesn't get spread, then eventually, those places could go away. And we don't want to see that happen. We want everybody who comes on the podcast to have a thriving business and be in the industry for as long as they want to be. That is it for this week. And we will talk to you guys next week.